G'day and welcome to Perko's podcast, a podcast all about strategy, leadership and soul care. We're here to help you obtain your personal, professional and spiritual goals without losing your soul. We hope that today's episode is refreshing and gives you a new perspective. Now here's your host, Jason Perkins.
G'day everyone and welcome to episode 33, part 1 of Perko's podcast. I hope that all is well with your souls and that you are able to get some much needed rest over the past couple of holiday weeks. I also hope that over the past couple of weeks during our Life Manifesto episodes that you were able to really consider who you want to become this year. If you missed that episode about creating a life manifesto, never fear. You can listen back to episode 32 with my good friend Sidara Udalagama to create your very own life manifesto. Today I'm very excited to introduce you to a good friend of mine who has not only shaped my leadership for many years, but also has shaped and influenced so many other lives as well. And I know that this conversation is going to be helpful for you reaching your goals without losing your soul. Before I do that though, I want to give a quick shout out to one of our listeners named Chris, who recently reached out to me to let me know that he is updating his life manifesto or dashboard, and the recent episodes were really helpful to him. I'm thrilled it was helpful for you, Chris, and even more importantly, I am pumped that you are taking the time to think about who you want to become this year, not just what you need to get done. I love hearing from people who listen to the podcast, and I would love to hear from you as well. So hit me up. The best way to do that is via Instagram. My account handle is at Jason Perko Perkins. I look forward to connecting with you online this week. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce you to today's guest, Clay Scroggins. Clay resides in Atlanta, Georgia with his wife Jenny, and they've got 5 kids. He's a speaker, a writer, and he creates content and resources on personal development for emerging leaders. Recently, Clay has gone through a major shift in his life, and we talk about this on the podcast, where he resigned from his role as lead pastor at one of North Point Community Church's campuses in the Atlanta area to pursue a career in writing and speaking. Clay originally graduated from Georgia Tech University as an industrial engineer and has then spent the past 20 years or so serving in the local church. Clay and I talk about the liminal space he is currently in, how to keep your soul sane in a season of change, and what things are looking like for his future. He's written 3 books, including How to Lead in a World of Distraction and How to Lead When You're Not in Charge, which was a phenomenal book that I read with my oldest son. Highly recommend it. Clay is a mastermind at taking what is typically only written for the head of a company or the primary leader of an organization and making it applicable to everyone. Clay has also just released a brand new book that came out on January the 11th called The Aspiring Leader's Guide to the Future: 9 Surprising Ways Leadership is Changing. Clay addresses topics such as vulnerability being a strength, how to perceive and embrace failure, how to build and gain trust, and how not only to brace for change, but embrace it as well. If you're interested in purchasing Clay's new book, you can do so by clicking on the link in the show notes. I hope you enjoy this conversation with my good friend, Clay Scroggins. Clay, mate, so good to see you. How are things in Atlanta, Georgia for you right these days?
Hot, very hot, Perko. It's like 95 degrees outside.
You know what?
Atlanta's got that nickname. Hot Atlanta, that's right.
That's it, man. It is known for that. So you guys are wrapping up your summer and heading into some cooler months, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. How about what's happening where you are?
So we are coming out of winter, which where I live is quite frankly the San Diego or like the kind of Fort Lauderdale of Australia. Like we're pretty cruisy when it comes to weather is concerned, and so we're coming out of winter, but winter's not that tough here. We probably see 70s most days, so we're going to be into some warmer months coming up. Yeah, so it's good stuff.
Lovely.
Mate, I want to dive into some really important questions because you're in a season right now that I think is fascinating for leaders to learn from. But before we get to the important questions, I've got this list of 10 uber important questions that will help us to get to know you a little bit. And I'm going to give you either or, and I just want you to pick one of the two as we fly through this list. Are you a coffee or tea drinker?
Coffee.
Coffee. Okay. Apple or PC?
Well, I hang on a second. This is this is sweet tea, cold tea.
Yeah, sweet iced tea. He's a true Southerner. That's what he is. Apple or PC, my friend. What do you like to use?
I like the Apple.
Okay, yeah. Beaches or mountains if you're going away?
Definitely the beach.
Okay. And are you a dog or a cat guy?
Dog.
I wouldn't have thought.
We just purchased a dog that we get next week.
Really?
The kids are pumped.
I bet. What kind of dog are you getting?
It's a little embarrassing, Jason, because it's one of those designer dogs.
Okay, a designer dog. I love that. Yep.
Yeah, it's like a Bichon mixed with a poodle. It's called a Biche Poo.
A Biche Poo. Okay.
So,
say that.
A Biche Poo.
Say that 5 times fast.
Yeah.
That'll get you into trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's good stuff. All right. I can't wait to see the dog, by the way. And for those that are listening to the podcast, Clay is a fun
Same.
follow on the Instagram. So make sure you follow along because you'll get to know the dog, I'm sure. Hey, are you a Netflix or a YouTube guy?
Probably more YouTube than Netflix for me.
Okay. Yeah. YouTube. All right. Call or text?
Definitely text.
Okay. All right. Definitely text. Podcast or music?
That's tough.
Yeah.
It's pretty split. I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of music, but I'd probably have to go music.
Really?
More than podcasts.
That's disappointing considering the platform that we are.
And I took that into consideration when I was making my answer, but I thought I gotta keep it 100.
That's it. You got that integrity thing is a big deal.
That's right.
All right. Passenger or driver?
Driver.
Okay. Saver or spender?
Spender. Married to a saver.
Okay, I was just going to say, does Jenny help keep the place sane? Okay,
that's right. That's right.
That's good. All right, final question in this 60 seconds with Perko, which always takes more than 60 seconds, but this is probably the most important question, Clay, of all time in the leadership realm. Toilet paper roll, are you an over or under guy?
Over.
Okay.
All day.
I knew we were good friends. I just knew it. That's so good.
There it is.
I love the fact that I can come over to your house, Clay, without any fear or trepidation of walking into your restroom and having to change things up. Like
thank you.
Super helpful.
Yes.
All right, man, we're gonna dive into some fun questions, and I think we're gonna learn a lot. I really do, from the season that you're currently in and some of the things that you are doing, and I'm stoked about it. On your website, here's what your bio says, Clay. Says pastor, speaker, author, father of 5. That's impressive right there. Father of 5. That's good. And Jenny's husband. I'm surprised that pro golfer is not listed there. I don't know, like if your publicist hasn't updated the website yet or what's the deal. But in all seriousness, I would love it for our Southern Hemisphere audience who may not be as familiar with some of your backstory. I'd love it if you just share a bit of your story, like grew up in the South and where you went to school and maybe some of your ministry experience. That'd be great. Yeah,
I do like to play a lot of golf.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but I'm currently in this new season of life where I'm working for myself right now, and I'm actually playing golf the next 3 days.
Nice.
And my wife's been giving me a hard time about it. Like, hey, when are you gonna work?
Yeah.
But that was the whole point of all this. So, my quick story. I grew up. I was born in Jacksonville, Florida. Moved to Tuscaloosa, Alabama when I was about 7. Grew up there. It's a town of about 100,000. It's got a university there, the University of Alabama, which is most most widely known for their college football team. They've won quite a few national championships. And over the past few years, my parents are big Alabama football fans. So therefore, growing up there, I am as well. Grew up in a Christian home, great parents who love Jesus, and I have an older sister and a younger sister. When it came time for me to go to college, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, to go to Georgia Tech, which is primarily an engineering school. So I studied industrial and systems engineering there. But the best thing that happened to me while I was there is I got connected to North Point Community Church. North Point was kind of in its infancy when I first started attending there. And it just had rapid growth in those kind of late 90s, early 2000 years. My life was radically shaped by North Point. I just loved the church. Andy Stanley was just such a unique voice Bible teacher in my life. And I remember praying at that, like 22, when I finally decided I think I'm going to do ministry with my vocation. I remember being like 21, 22, wrapping up college, praying, God, if you would allow me to, that's the kind of person I'd like to work for.
Wow.
That's the kind of person I want to be shaped by. So God answered that prayer, which was tremendous, a huge blessing for me. I moved to Dallas, Texas to go to seminary, but quickly started working for North Point and worked in student ministry. They would fly me back from Dallas, Texas, where I was studying and they would fly me back about every other weekend to speak to their student ministry. At the time, North Point was in a season where they were flush with cash.
Okay.
They just had one site, and they were willing to fly me back, which was great. So anyway, I worked in student ministry for probably the next 8 years. Met my wife in Dallas, Texas. She's a Texan, not Austin, but a little town called Tyler, Texas, in East Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved to Atlanta in 2006. It was moving back for me, and I served as our high school ministry. I was our high school director for the next 5 years. And so Andy Stanley's kids all came through the student ministry that I was leading it at the time, which was kind of it was like a make it break it thing when the senior pastor's kids are in your student ministry. So we've got a lot of fun stories about that season of life. But that was a really sweet season for us. We had our first kid, and we were just really loving student ministry, going on trips with students and hanging out with students a lot. Became a campus pastor at one of our campuses. We got, I guess at the time we had 3 campuses in Atlanta. We now have 8 campuses in the Atlanta area, but I was a campus pastor for the next 10 years at one of our campuses called Brownsbridge. Then I was in Alpharetta at our original campus called North Point in Alpharetta, and then moved to Buckhead Church 2 years ago. And then I resigned about a month ago. So I've been trying to figure out life for the last month, trying to play as much golf as possible. So that's pretty much it.
I love it.
Nutshell.
Well, and we're going to talk, Clay, we're going to talk more about what's next or what you are thinking about what is next for you, because you don't have a clear, it sounds like you didn't quit your job and resign and because you're taking in a new role either within North Point or outside of North Point. So we'll get to that in a little bit, but I just want to say on a personal level, Clay, I've been tracking with you throughout the years, primarily through message series, to be honest, like, the series that you do at North Point or at the campuses that you've been serving at. And they've been hugely helpful. In fact, the theme of our podcast is helping leaders reach their goals without losing their souls. And you've done some series over the years related to kind of emotional health, I would call it, where you've kind of jumped into that space. And they've been super influential for me personally and in my leadership. And just wanted to say a huge thanks. And so it's actually a message that you did recently that caught my attention that I was like, you know what, I got to reach out to Clay. I'd love to have a conversation with him while he's going through this season. The title of the message was How to Keep Your Soul Sane in a Season of Change, which I love that. And you talked about one of the most famous, I think probably the most famous poems of all time, Psalm 23. And you highlighted in the message this line that says, "He makes me lie down in green pastures. He refreshes my soul." I would love to know, Clay, just to take a deep dive straight into it. What does lying down in green pastures look like for you on a practical level? How does that typically play out for you?
That's a great. Um, that's an important question for sure. It's a question I'm still trying to figure out how to answer. But let me just back up 1 second, Jason, to tell you. Thank you for the kind things you said about my sermons. I'll return the compliments. When you were leading Red Rock Church in Colorado, I remember listening to you talk about some of the things you all were doing in the community, and that had a really big influence on me as I had just transitioned to Buckhead Church, trying to figure out how could we love the city of Atlanta, at least make sure that the city of Atlanta, the people in the city of Atlanta, knew that we loved them. So anyway, mutual respect for what you've done as a leader as well. Yeah, laying down in green pastures. That little phrase, it begins with "He makes me
Mm,
lie down in green pastures."
yes.
It's a little bit. It reminds me of that popular worship song right now that says that he's chasing after me. Is that the idea that he's running after me? I think it's in that Bethel song, "Goodness of
Mhm.
God," in the
Yeah.
bridge. Anyway, similar concept of I don't know why sometimes we make God's goodness and his mercy chase after us or run after us. So many times in my life I've just thought, why don't I just stop and just lie down? Why do I make him make me lie down in the green pastures? Why don't I just lie down in the green pastures? But yeah, for me, it doesn't come easy. I like progress. I like movement. I like activity.
Mm,
I'm also highly relational, so it's just hard to, um, I don't enjoy rest very well.
yeah.
And you know, who knows exactly what David was talking about, inspired by the Holy Spirit, but my guess is, as best I can tell, that green pasture represents rest, that time when we've got to stop to depend on him.
Mm,
So I would say it's some of those rhythms, those spiritual disciplines, all the things that we make ourselves stop doing. Sabbath is pretty important to me. That's been a pretty important routine in my own life. I would also just say, those, not just the weekly Sabbath, but those times of vacation, detaching from work, pulling away from it. It was
mm,
interesting to me. The longer I was in ministry, the more I look forward to the weekend.
yeah.
The harder ministry got, the more I look forward to the weekend, and really turning it off. Choosing to turn it off for a season of time to remind ourselves, depend on us, that it's going to keep going no matter what. That God's going to, He's going to continue to lead people to Himself, either with us or without us. And that's all been. Those are the green pastures for me. Is really those moments of dependence, of uh, pressing pause on work for sure.
Yeah. I, Clay, am a recovering achieveaholic. I am an
Yeah,
Enneagram 3. And so I just love, I remember telling somebody in the job interview for the role that you talked about at Red Rock Church in Colorado, I remember telling them with pride that I am addicted to progress and I just love progress, as if that was some sort of badge of honor. And
uh-huh.
man, it is hard when that line says he makes me lie down. I feel like every Friday, because I happen to Sabbath from Friday night to Saturday night, just because of the rhythm of our lives.
Yeah,
I feel like
yeah.
every single Friday it's an act of surrender to just put it down and
Mm.
not look at it for 24 hours is a big deal. Big deal. It's tough. It's not easy. I know some people maybe it comes easier to them, but for me anyway, and it sounds like for you, it's a challenge. Can be. Would that be true?
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm learning in this season, um, I like being needed. And there's something good about being needed. I think when we feel like we're really helping people, doing our part to love and serve others, then I think it's natural when you're in a position of leadership and there's people that depend on you, you're going to naturally feel needed. And it's my day of work was July 30th. So as the time we're doing this podcast is August 30th. So is it the 30th or the 29th? It's the 30th where you are, 31st?
30th where I'm at. Yep.
Something like that.
Yep.
So we're about a month. It's been a month for me, and already, the less emails coming in, the phone rings less text messages, but it's as hard as that has been, it's been good to, that I think one of the things that Green Pasture does is it helps us realize that we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. There's something I like about taking myself pretty seriously, but learning to not take myself too seriously, I think is a really good it's an exercise of reality, an exercise of humility. It certainly is. Yeah, it's a discipline. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was listening to a mutual friend of ours. Kerry had Gordon McDonald on his podcast recently. And as he gets older, he's talking about this idea of more and more obscurity. The older you get, the more obscure you become, and less people texting you, less people asking you to come and speak at a conference or whatever, and talking about preparing for that early. And I was like, man, I need to pay attention to that and be aware of the fact that that's just a reality of life. So yeah, it's good. Hey, last year, Clay, for me, I hit a massive wall. Before we pressed record on the podcast and started recording, I shared with you just briefly, I hit something at the beginning of 2020 that just kind of blew up my world. The whole reason we had come back to Australia 2 years ago disappeared overnight, like it was gone. And then 2 weeks later, this little thing called a global pandemic hit. So people were not hiring. We were talking about, do we go back to the States? Do we stay in Australia? Like just so many questions. So what had wrapped up, and we had no idea, quite frankly, of what was next in the midst of a very significant global crisis. And I came across this term or this phrase called liminal space. And I guess it comes from like architectural backgrounds, kind of the space between what was and what's next. And so like a hallway is a liminal space, or an airport in transportation terms is you're not there yet to your destination, but you've left the place you were, traveling from. And so I've dove into this concept of a liminal space, this season of waiting and not knowing. And it seems like currently you're in a bit of a liminal space. Would you describe it? As that? And I'd love to know, what's been your greatest fear in this season, in this liminal space? What's been kind of the thing that you've wrestled with the most from an emotion standpoint?
Yeah, that term is just a couple of weeks old for me as well. I just got familiar with it a couple weeks ago, talking to a new friend of mine about just as you described it, and we were talking about it from the sense that there just aren't many liminal spaces in our lives anymore. I mean, we've filled everything up. I mean, we don't wait in waiting rooms as much. We don't wait. Even over the last couple of years, I mean, I have zero tolerance for traffic, and I live in a city that has pretty bad traffic, but we just haven't had a lot of traffic, and we haven't sat in a lot of traffic, and there are less and less of those spaces where we're just sitting there. I love the way you put it. What has been is over, and what's to come has not yet come.
Yeah.
And it's really such a good, I think it's such a great way to think about this life, that in a way, that is what this life is all about. That we are coming from somewhere and we're going to somewhere, but we're not yet there. And what we do with that space, I think, is really important. I think what I've discovered in this season, because my career took a pretty substantial shift when we decided a couple of months ago that our time at North Point Ministries was finished. And so I had this really healthy, fantastically, as positive as it could have been, meeting with Andy Stanley, where I said, "Hey, I'm here to let you know that I'm going to resign at the end of the year." That was that was ending a season. A season was coming to a conclusion, and I still don't exactly know what's coming up next. And so one of the things I'm trying to discover, trying to learn, is not seeing this time as the time of waiting, not seeing this time as, grieving something that is over and waiting in anticipation for something to come, but really trying to live in this day as this is the time, that this is the space, that this is the season. And some of that is just the way my own career is working out. I'm currently working for myself, doing a bunch of different projects that I'm kind of orchestrating on my own, still doing some preaching, still doing some things with our North Point Partner Network. And what I'm discovering is I think the waiting might actually become the thing. It might actually be it might actually be the now. The now, the future may have actually arrived, and that's not easy to determine that. But that's been a really good challenge for me to not just live in the past and not just live in anticipation of the future, but really trying to live as if it is the thing. Today is the moment. A great time to practice that, Jason, is next time you're on a flight and the airplane is taxiing from after you land to the time you get to the gate. That is the most difficult time in life to be content. One of the most difficult times in life, because you think we're already there, but we're not yet there yet.
Yes.
And if you can in that moment go, all right, this is a good moment for me to practice. How can I be present and be content in this liminal space? It's a really good exercise. I'll stop there and let you respond to any of that. I know you asked about fear, and I'll happy to get to that as well.
No, I love
talk too much, so I'll stop.
Clay. I love, mate, the idea that we can be in that place, and it may not be the in-between place. We may actually already be where God wants us to be. In fact, I'm convinced that we are where He wants us to be,
right? And
He wants us to lean into Him. Right. in that space. And yet so often our mind is, maybe like you said, in the past or in the future. At least that's where mine tends to go, is always, tends to go future. But it may be, no, he's like, no, present is exactly what I want you to be focused on. You mentioned about some fears, some for you, some for Jenny, for the kids. What would you say has been the greatest challenge there?
Yeah, once I kind of, everybody's had this experience. One of the things I've discovered over the last month is you live your own life thinking that it's so unique, but then you start telling your story to other people, and almost everyone I've told my story to just kind of kindly starts smiling and goes, "Yeah, we've been there before, or we are there now."
Yeah.
We really just, once we realized our season was over. And yet we didn't know exactly what was next, but we felt like I needed to go ahead and resign and take a step away. And we're still attending our church. On Sunday, I was volunteering in our kids ministry, I told the Bible story on Sunday to kindergartners and first graders, which was the kind of where I really began 20 years ago, learning how to preach. But once we decided we were going to step away and we didn't exactly know what was next, the fear of the natural anxiety of how are we going to make it financially was a pretty strong driver. We're doing fine, and we got a couple months buffer, which is good. But, most people, at least the way I had lived the last couple of years, was in that self-actualization on Maslow's pyramid of needs, his hierarchy of needs. That top need is self-actualization, of fulfillment and purpose, and what am I here for? All those existential questions of life. As soon as the reality of this new season kind of hit me, I moved down to the food, shelter, clothing section of the needs pyramid. So, I mean, that's certainly one, is just how are we going to make it? But I also think probably the fear that I wrestle with most is, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? As if there's a way that I could miss that, or there's a way that I could get out of line with God's personal plan for my life, when that's not actually what I believe about God's plan for my life.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get away from the what should I be doing, what am I supposed to be doing,
Yep.
and really trying to find, not in a selfish or egocentric kind of way of but what do I want to be doing?
Yeah.
Because I really think, the intersection of where is God at work, and what desires and gifts has he put in me, and what makes me want to come alive, that intersection is really where I think we all want to be. That a place where God is really active, doing a lot, and a place where I'm alive, exercising the gifts and talents, and also the passions that he's put inside of me. So I'm trying to move away from the fear of, oh no, am I doing the right thing, or am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing, what I should be doing, to God, am I living out that John 10:10 abundant life, more life kind of way of life? Am I coming more alive as I'm moving closer to those desires and passions that he's put inside of me?
Yeah. Clay, it's almost like you're saying that if I am being the person that God has called me to be, then I'll be in that intersection of where he's working, how he's uniquely created and wired me, and I'll end up doing the thing that he wants me to be a part of doing. Yeah, I love it. So good, man.
Yeah,
Hey,
that's well said. I mean, the question of what do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want? That has been a helpful and guiding question for me. It's been a really challenging question to, of course, you got all the spiritual answers of, I want God to be most glorified in my life. I want to be used by God. But really trying to figure out what do I want? What do I want out of life? Am I trying to be famous? Am I trying to matter? And then, you got the kids that God's put in your life, and the wife that he's put in your life. And I think the last month has been one of the most rewarding things for me, is just being able to be around to help out more. Has been a really great hidden blessing that I didn't even realize that I would enjoy. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, well, is your wife enjoying you being around more? And I thought, that's a great question. I should probably ask her that. I did ask her, and she was like, yeah, of course. But anyway, that's been a really tricky question for me to answer, is what is it that I want in this season? And not just in this season, but for my life.
Yeah.
And what does God want for my life? Those are, it's been a challenging season in that regard.
Clay, those are great questions, man. And as I listen to you talking about this, I'm reminded of something I went through 18 months ago. I was asking the same questions. I was like, there is no job opportunities on the horizon because the global pandemic, no church or ministry was hiring anybody. And we had just moved back to Australia. And I got, you talk about the hierarchy of needs. I'm literally like applying for jobs at our version of like a Publix, because I'm like, I could at least drive groceries, because groceries, people need them right now and they can't get to the grocery store. And so, but I'm just so thankful. I went back to some stuff from like Stephen Covey and talking about starting with the end in mind. And I just went back to kind of that eulogy exercise type stuff. And I ended up,
that's good.
looking at the 8 areas, kind of arenas of life that Michael Hyatt would kind of say, we have these 5 kind of arenas in our, 8 kind of arenas in my life. And I ended up writing a win statement, stole this from North Point over the years, a win statement for each one of those arenas of my life. And they've become like a daily affirmation. This is super weird, but I've recorded them and I listen to them in my own voice, speaking them to me. And they've been super helpful for me, because otherwise I feel like I would end up maybe drifting to some direction that at the end of my days, I wasn't planning on getting to. So that I appreciate you sharing that, because it's been a part of my journey. And I feel like as people are listening, they can know, hey, these are questions that everyone wrestles with. These are the big questions that people are wrestling with. Hey, I would love to know, because I think some people, like you said before, you shared your story and people have said, oh yeah, I've been there, or they smiled and kind of nodded like, yeah, we're there right now. I'd love to know, you've shared openly about a little bit of what you would call like professional restlessness, I guess, that started coming up in you over the past couple of years. If someone's sensing the same kind of feeling professionally, what advice would you give them? Would you tell them like, hey, go talk to your boss? Or would you say, like your dad has said to you, like, don't quit a job without another job? Like, what's the advice you would that you would suggest to them as they feel that restlessness? What would you give them?
Well, I would say open up to your community, whoever those people closest to you are. I think the better, regardless of what happens, without any fear of what the end and whatever could happen in the end. That was probably the most catalytic moment for me. Was I had these 4 friends of mine. It felt a little bit like, that the early section in Mark's gospel where he talks about the paralytic man who had the 4 friends that took him up on the roof and dug through the roof and got down to Jesus. I had an incident like that was just really helpful. It was probably close to a year ago now. I had some friends that were noticing that restlessness, and the way they were seeing it manifest itself is their words were, you just don't seem like you're yourself. You don't seem like you're fully alive. You don't seem like you're operating at the horsepower that God has put within you. I remember they asked me, they said, what percentage do you think you're operating? And because I said, yeah, I agree, I'm probably not. They said, what percentage? I said, I'd probably 85%. And they said, oh, we were going to say 65%.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, geez, it's worse than I thought, And so they did they said, hey, we want to do a half-day planning session. We'll do it on your back porch on a Friday afternoon. We just want to come over to your house and we just want to talk about your future. Where do you see yourself headed? And a couple of them had resigned from their jobs previously. And so in the last year or so. And so I told them, I said, I'll do this on one condition, that the goal of this cannot be that you all try to make me quit, because that's not on the table right now. And they said, yeah, that's not what this is about. We're not going to try to make you quit. We're just going to ask you some questions. So, I mean, they did. They asked me, what's your perfect day? What are the things you love most about your job? Let's talk about the past couple of years. What are some of the hurts that you're still carrying? What are some of what are your greatest disappointments, your greatest failures? What are those things that you're even slightly embarrassed of, or you wish would have gone differently? What do you see your gifts? How do you see, how do you think God sees your gifts? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? All those kinds of important questions. And it gave me, I think in the moment, it was a little bit scary articulating some of the things I was feeling, but it created a really healthy sense of accountability with those guys. I ended up meeting with them. I called them about 6 weeks later just to kind of do a follow-up. A couple months later, met with them again, had another phone call with them just before I had my big meeting with Andy where I was going to resign. And they were just, they were so helpful in helping me navigate this season. I'm an extrovert, so I needed to talk things out, talk things through. So I would say that's probably the healthiest, the best most helpful asset that I had in this season was an amazing wife, a really great coach. There's a professional coach that I've been using for the past 4 or 5 years who was just really helpful. And then these 4 friends that just helped me talk it all out and think it all through so that I wasn't just making this decision in isolation, or they were just really, the big fear of I'm not going to be able to make it, or I'm not going to be able to provide. They were really, really good about putting that aside, just going like, look, I don't know how else to tell you this, but you're going to be able to provide for your family. So let's put that concern over here on the side. I had this issue where I was either thinking, okay, I've kind of hit a lid where I'm at. I've just kind of bumped into the ceiling in my own personal leadership.
Yeah.
And the other option is we've got to move somewhere else to become a senior pastor.
Yeah.
They were really helpful at going, hey, in between those 2 options, there's about 100,000 options of what God might want to do in you and through you. And so can we at least start putting some of those on the table?
Yeah.
One of them said, hey, why is quitting so scary? Or why is quitting the worst thing in the world to you? And I said, it's not the worst thing in the world to me. It's the worst thing in the world to my dad. And they were like, should you pay attention to that? I mean, I like many people, I'm 41, so my parents are in their late 60s, but my dad worked in the same job for 40 years.
Yeah.
He just was in that generation where you just didn't change jobs. You just got in the job you were in and you just stayed in it. Then we've got this swing where we've got this group of millennial Gen Zs that are, changing jobs every 2 years. But here I was kind of somewhere in between there, wrestling through what felt like the most disloyal, the most unfaithful. I was leaving my post. I was, felt like I was just carrying a lot of false guilt, even over the thought of stepping away. And so just dealing with a lot of that was something I couldn't have done without community. I'll stop there, but that was probably some of the most helpful things that I had going for me in this last season.
Clay, I love for anyone that's listening, if you're going through that kind of restlessness, I hear one big word stands out to me: community. You leaned into it. People rallied around you, whether it was your wife or whether it was this group of friends or even the coach that you have. Like, just seems to me like that's a great place to begin, is to have a bunch of people that really care about you come in and ask you some tough questions, but speak a lot of truth into your life. Because I hear you when you said, my options are like, I've hit this lid here, so I stay here, or I go get a lead pastor job somewhere else. Like, that's all I can do. I got 2 options or whatever. And your friends are like, oh no, there's like thousands of other options.
Right.
But you can't see that when you're in you so desperately need others to say, oh no, you have a lot of other options. Like, I remember thinking, all I can do is drive groceries, so I got to go apply for that. And there are lots of other options out there. There are a lot of out there. Hey, Clay, I want to wrap up our conversation by just talking about a couple of things that you've done already. You've written a couple of books, which, by the way, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. That was super helpful. I actually read through that with my oldest son at his first job at Chick-fil-A. He was working at Chick-fil-A when we were living in Colorado, frustrated with some of the people that maybe were, supervisors and managers who were all of about like 6 months, I think, older than he was, kind of thing. And
right.
I'm just helping him kind of navigate. That was a hugely helpful one. And then leading in a very distracted world, like that's another great. You've got a new one coming out. Are you allowed to talk about that? What that one's going to be about? I'd love to know.
Yeah, for sure. It's called The Aspiring Leader's Guide to the Future: 9 Surprising Ways Leadership is Changing.
Yeah.
So it's just all about, hey, nobody knows where the future of leadership is going. I think we would all agree it's changing. As the world changes, it's demanding a different kind of leader. And instead of, that Wayne Gretzky quote, instead of skating to where the puck is, we've really got to figure out where's the puck going, and then we've got to skate there. So this book is just an attempt to help aspiring leaders do that, to go, okay, how is leadership changing? How can I start the kind of leader that the future is going to demand, so that I can be the best version of myself so that I can lead as best as I can in the future.
Yeah. When's that coming out, Clay? When will that be available?
January 2022.
Okay.
So what is that, about 4 or 5 months away?
Yeah. We'll keep an eye out for it. Can't wait for that. It'll be, I'm sure, another excellent resource like the others have been as well. I'd love for us to just wrap up, Clay, by having you do a couple of things. Tell people how they can follow along with your journey and with your resources. You've got these books and you've got some other things that you're planning to do, or if somebody's listening and they're like, hey, I'd love to have Clay come speak at our conference or at our church. What's the best way for people to track with all that?
Well, if you have interest in any of those, getting on my mailing list would be great. If you go to clayscroggins.com, you can do that. Two things that I'm going to be releasing in the next month or so, but I've created a 90-day leadership intensive. I'm calling it an influence sprint. So, if you were to take the next 90 days and work on your physical health, I would assume you could figure out how to do that. If you could take the next 90 days and work on your spiritual health, you absolutely could do that. But what if you took the next 90 days to work on the influence that you have in the role that you're in, or in the home that you're in, or in the school that you're in? Who knows what God might do through that. And then secondly, we're doing a should I stay or should I go resource.
Okay. I love it.
Which will be just a conversation with me and a few other leaders. One leader who has recently left, one leader who has decided to stay, one leader who's gotten let go from a job, and then a counselor / therapist who's just going to help us unpack some of the things to watch out for that are going through our heart and going through our mind when we're in the middle of that professional restlessness. But clayscroggins.com, if you go to the subscribe to the mailing list, you can get access to both of those opportunities.
Yeah, super cool. Hey, thanks so much for getting that song, by the way, embedded in my brain now for the rest of today, because it is early here. It's early in Australia, but should I stay or should I go now is going to be playing on repeat for me, but I appreciate that. Hey, after this conversation is done and people stop listening to the podcast, what's the one big thing you hope people hear today? What's the burning thing on your heart that you hope leaders hear this the most?
Well, I mean, that Psalm 23, what hit me so hard from it was just that first line: the Lord is my shepherd and I shall not want, or I lack nothing.
Yeah.
That concept is just fear that I had about the future, the fear that I had about missing out, or not, even losing my way, or not finding what I felt like God had specifically for me. Just really trying to put my faith and trust in that simple idea that I lack nothing, that if I have him, then I really do lack nothing. If my eyes are on the shepherd, if I really am following the shepherd, then that's all that I need. For some people that might be a message that's worn out, but I think for a lot of leaders right now, for a lot of pastors, for a lot of followers of Jesus, we've got to recenter our lives on that simple idea that he is my shepherd, and with him I really do have all that I need.
Yeah.
I hope people will remember that.
Yeah. I have this quote that's kind of going around in my mind right now as I'm hearing you say that, that's been playing on repeat for me the last couple of months, from good old Henry Nouwen. He says, "You are not what you do. You are not what you have. You are not what others think or say about you. You are the beloved child of God." Clay, you've been a great friend, man.
It's great.
I really appreciate the influence that you've had in my life. As I mentioned at the top of the conversation, it's been super helpful, especially in my own journey of soul care. And I just want to remind you and remind myself and remind everyone that's listening, we are the beloved children of God, period. And I'm so grateful for that. So grateful. Hey, blessings to you, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jason.
Wow, what a powerful, powerful conversation. Especially, I think this is going to be helpful if you are currently in a season of transition, or if you're about to be in a season of transition, or maybe you've already gone through it and you're thinking back saying, I wish I had done some things differently. I especially loved the questions that Clay's friends asked him on the back deck of his house. They asked him, hey Clay, what does your perfect day look like? Or what do you love about your job? What are some of the hurts that you're still carrying from the last couple of years? What are some of your greatest failures or disappointments, even things that you're a bit embarrassed about or you wish had gone differently? How has God uniquely wired you, and how does He see your gifts being used? And then this question, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years from now? I hope that the questions that his friends asked him will be helpful for each one of you that are listening to this conversation today as well. Hey, before I go, I want to make sure that you don't miss any conversations like this one, especially if you're new to the podcast. So if you haven't already done so, make sure you head over to my website, jasonperkoperkins.com, and sign up for my email list. We're actually going to be sending out a number of resources that will be helpful for people reaching their goals without losing their souls. Not only notifying you of when new episodes are released from the podcast, but also just resources that will help you as you reach your goals without losing your soul. I promise we're not going to inundate you with emails every day. My goal is not to fill up your inbox. In fact, I loathe those kinds of emails, so I don't want to send those to you. We just want to help you, again, reach your goals without losing your soul. If you feel inclined to, I would love it if you'd subscribe to this podcast by hitting that button on whatever platform that you prefer to listen to it on, the subscribe button. Go ahead and do that. And I'd also love it if you'd consider leaving us a review. That is super helpful for us to know exactly the content that is helpful for you and topics that you would love to hear more of on the podcast. But it's also helpful in getting the conversations to as many people as possible. Those reviews help to get the word out about the podcast. As always, I love hearing from people that are enjoying the conversations or are finding the conversations helpful in feeding their souls. So we would love to hear from you. And the best way to do that is just to hit me up on social media, especially Instagram. My handle there is @JasonPerkoPerkins, and there's a link in the bio to a connect form where I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to hear from you if there's a specific topic that you'd like to discuss further or a person that you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast. So make sure you hit me up this week online. Hey, my dream is super simple. I want to see a generation of leaders reach their goals and at the same time hear them say, "It is well with my soul." Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to this episode today. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to connecting with you online this week and can't wait to share a brand new episode of the podcast with you next week. Until then, cheers.